Hi. So I was scrolling on YouTube the other day and found this video by Grailden talking about the JRPG that does everything wrong. Admittedly, I was intrigued. Honestly, it's an excellent video that goes over his problems with the game and every single, suffice to say, interesting quirk that it has, with the main objective to detract as many people from purchasing the game. So logically, my main thought was to immediately buy the game on Steam. This is Arcane Raise, a game that is, quote, a very special gem. A hardcore role-playing video game created through passion. And it's a game that is guaranteed to be something you will remember, for better or worse. It will be ingrained in your memory forever and ever. Is that a threat? It talks very highly of itself on its Steam description, like it should be up there with AAA games in the quality. The game's $1. Looking further in the description reveals that it's apparently a franchise. Arcane pre-raise, Arcane re-raise, these sound like you're describing an erection. Looking further down, we have the features list. I like how the header is the only one in quotes. Glorious, 60 FPS, smooth as butter. A free lorebook DLC explaining the backstory. Just explain that in the game. Will run on practically any system. God, I hope so. I want to play Arcane Raise on a Nintendo 64. Astonishing level design and brutal enemy placement. An excruciating difficulty which stems from unique balancing. Deep lore and engaging backstory, part of a bigger universe, so explain it in the game. Extremely demanding but lengthy with a couple of interconnected maps. So is that a good thing? Minimalistic storytelling. Lore is explored through the environment and dialogue. I'll explain why this is really ironic once we actually get into the game, but trust me, don't forget this one. The perfect gift for a family or friend's birthday. Make your loved one happy. Or dead. For more information, read this. There's no link. With how humble the game talks about itself, I think it's only right to pay the $1 fee and see what Arcane Raise has to show. I don't even know where to begin with a game like this. I knew that this was gonna be bad, but I didn't know to the extent of how bored I was playing through this. Without getting too ahead of myself, it commits every single sin of an RPG ever conceived. An overabundance of encounters? Check. Poor dungeon design? Check. A deceptively basic combat system that is downright reductive at points? Check. An overdependence on that repetitive combat system instead of anything else? Check. An absurd amount of useless skills and spells that nobody will ever even remember at the end of the game? Check. Claiming to have deep and complex lore, but it's actually very superficial at the end of the day. Not quite check, but it actually ends up being worse than you would think. But again, we'll get to that. But I think the best way to talk about Arcane Raise is to analyze the first 5 minutes of the game. So let's hit that play button and get right into the excitement. Where is it? Why is it so small? It's about the size of my palm. You gotta right-click the game menu and go into properties just to get it to go into full screen. And trust me when I say, you do not want to do that. It's one of those full screen games that ends up messing up the entirety of your monitor and double sizing everything. Like, come on, can we just have borderless full screen? Is that so hard? Whatever, let's just press a new game and experience whatever Arcane Raise has to show us. What the fuck? This is apparently the tutorial game, which I thought was so ugly that I decided to skip it immediately. Who needs tutorials anyway? I'm sure none of it will actually matter in the end. Then we reach this wall of text, which basically says that we have the option to unlock all the achievements immediately or unlock none of them. Now, what I thought this originally meant was that we were able to unlock them as we progress through the game, instead of, it being completely impossible. But no, you are unable to get the achievements if you do not select the unlock all achievements button. This is just such a weird choice of design that I still don't understand to this day. It's like asking if somebody wants free money or no money. Like, they're gonna pick the free money no matter what. I paid $1 for this game. I'm gonna get all that I can out of it, god damn it. Going down the long hallway of death, we are then sent to the main hub world. It features 2 NPCs, a building, and 4 portals that are all interactable. The first guy you can talk to just gives a really long lore dump that I do not give 2 shits about because I know it is going to be the only amount of background development that we get throughout the entire game. And no, I am not kidding. Outside of one other instance, there is no other unique dialogue that tells us more about the story. Minimalistic storytelling was definitely accurate. Entering the building sends us to a map with 4 different stairs that leads us to different shops, including armor, weapons, items, and stat upgrades, and an NPC that acts as a full restore inn of sorts. This, in theory, is all completely fine, but there is definitely a lot that I can criticize that I will return to in just a moment. Going back outside, we can interact with the other bigger NPC and find out that it's the final boss of the game. Now, you can say that this is lazy, bad game design, a really forced way to do non-linearity, but honestly, I kinda like this idea. You're able to challenge a final boss at any point, which allows the player to experiment to see how much they need to grind to be able to beat it, which I personally think is kind of interesting. Now, in execution, it's fucking atrocious, but we'll get there. The final interactables are the 4 portals which lead to the 4 dungeons of the game. These include the Lost Forest, the Poison Swamp, the Jungle Maze, which is just a Lost Forest again, but a little bit darker, and Inferno, all having unique enemies and quirks along the way. Now that you know the basics of the game, how does it actually hold up? One of the most important elements of any RPG, at least in my opinion, is the story. I look at the two most important games in my life, that being Undertale and Omori, as a big example of this. When you think of these games, the first thing you think about is the plot. Undertale maybe to a lesser extent because of the significance of the meta-narrative and its fourth wall fuckery, but nevertheless, my point still stands. The point being, without a good narrative throughout the game tying it together, it loses most purpose. Why should you care about the characters or finishing the game if there's no real stakes to it? Of course, sandboxes like Minecraft and Terraria defied this idea, as a loose story might follow the game, but most players aren't really going to interact with it. They aren't trying to immerse you into a deep story that forces you to think about the existential crisis of life, but instead they're just made for you to have fun. That is the point of it. The point of it is to be narratively simple, to let the gameplay take over. Now, of course, when you think of the origins of RPGs, you always think of Dungeons & Dragons, which is inherently very story-based. Of course, there is combat, but without the plot, it just turns into a fighting simulator, which, unless your fighting system is very deep and complex and engaging, it's just gonna get boring really quickly. This is why great narratives in JRPGs are so fucking important. And yeah, that's why I put them on such a high pedestal. I've seen some great ones, and I want to see even better ones in the future. All this leading up to say that Arcane Race's plot is an insult to storytelling. I don't even know how they messed this up so badly. Now, don't get me wrong, I've seen bad stories. I've watched Charlotte 3 times over. I know what hell looks like. But 2 lines of plot dialogue? 2? Do you know where most of the story of the game actually is? A lore book that you get when you purchase the game. If you put it into a Google Doc, it's around 4 pages, which isn't really that long, but I'm gonna be honest, I didn't read it. I got around 3 paragraphs in before I decided it's not worth my time and no one would really care about it anyway, so I'm just gonna skip over it really. However, I will call attention to 2 sentences because they made me burst out laughing whenever I was just skimming over it. Direct quote from the lore book. There's always a male and a female alpha. The female does not talk, or if she does, humans cannot hear or understand her. Arcane Race is the fucking patriarchy. By just skimming over the lore book, I can tell it's really edgy and honestly super fucking pretentious. Though, to be fair, I kind of wish it was actually in the game so I'd have something more to laugh about that was, you know, in-game. But I call attention to this because the implications are the actual thing that bothers me. The fact I played through your entire game and you gave me only 2 lines of story is just really insulting. I would have to play through Arcane Race probably about 50 times before it amounts to the length of the lore book. That is absurd, and to me shows a clear lack of understanding of how important a plot is to an RPG. Our motivation is made vaguely clear, but it's not enough for me to really care about what I'm doing. Also, I don't really know where to put this, but I just wanted to mention that this run-on sentence is really funny to me. And the final boss doesn't really give any more plot details and more just explains what the portals actually do and shows that you can't fight him. Even when you beat him, nothing really changes. It just nothing matters. It doesn't matter. Nothing fucking matters. The only thing that can make this game bearable with the plot that it has is a good gameplay loop, which is not what this game has. I'll preface Chapter 3 by saying this first. I know it's very easy to call me a hypocrite for something like this, considering my favorite game is Omori, which is infamous for its lackluster battle system, but I'll defend that game's combat 100%, no questions asked. While it is rather simple, the skills still feel tangible and it feels balanced for the most part. There's not really ever a point in the game in which I felt the need to grind to progress. I've actually been working on a massive Omori video for a very long time, which I want to go further into the combat system in that video, so I'm not going to dwell too long on this point. I only bring it up because I think it's an interesting comparison for Arcane Race. I think Arcane Race has the lowest parts of the Omori battle system and completely throws away any of the good parts. I cannot tell you a single skill this game has that I actually felt inclined to use. There is an exception to this, but I will talk about that later in the video. It falls into the same pit traps that I think a lot of JRPGs fall into, which is spam the confirm button to get through every single battle. You can maybe levy this criticism against Omori as well, but come on, at least the encounters were on the overworld and not random. And another problem. This is something I just have with RPGs in general, that they don't seem to change a lot. When I'm fighting an enemy, I want to see their health. I want to know how much damage I'm doing in comparison to the rest of their HP, so I'm able to strategize on how I'm going to use my party members' turns. By removing this feature, it's pretty much just a fucking guessing game. Do you know what else I can play if I want to play a guessing game? Go fish! To get stronger, you go through traditional level ups. Just typical stat increases and you get some new skills every now and then. And God, do I wish I could see what stats grow when I level up and by how much exactly. One of the best parts about leveling up is feeling your power. Even if it's somewhat of a placebo effect, at least you can know that you are getting stronger by seeing the tangible number go up. In Arcane raids, I never feel like I'm getting stronger. Even when buying new weapons and armors from the shop, it just doesn't ever click with me. And some of it comes down to how long some of these shitty battles can take. To demonstrate, I will speed up an entire battle in late game. Additionally, I'll also play some pretty fun music, but I can still guarantee you're gonna be bored by the end of it. Engaging, huh? And for more information, I was pretty much spamming confirm the entire time. And for even more information, I was at the final dungeon of the game under 2 hours of playtime. How is that possible? Well, one of the most important elements of any single media, including videos, movies, games, or books, or anything, is the pacing. Something that I know nothing about. You can make or break a product just by the structure of it. I think a lot of people underestimate how difficult it is to be able to balance the amount of time from whenever you start something to whenever you end it and making it reasonable. In video games, we call this balancing, the difficulty of the enemies compared to the strengths of the player. Now, I've talked to a decent amount of game devs, and pretty much all of them agree that, yeah, balancing is their least favorite part of making a game. It is extremely difficult to be able to predict how players are going to progress through your game and if they're going to use every opportunity they can to get stronger. Personally, whenever I was making custom Minecraft projects for my friends with different new weapons, this was the thing I struggled with the most. All of this to say, I would be able to give the creator of Arcane Raise a bit more leniency with something like this, mostly because of the frustration that comes with balancing, and also it's just very difficult. However, I'm not going to do that because I think it couldn't have been handled worse. You were able to buy every single weapon of every single tier from the beginning of the game. That in and of itself isn't that bad because they're all priced respectively to make it get harder as you continue on. However, in the first dungeon, chests that have gold are all set to a fixed amount, and this fixed amount is quite a lot. With this, you can progression skip multiple tiers in almost an instant and have like tier 4 weapons by the first dungeon. Again, on paper, this isn't horrible. Progression skips are actually pretty healthy for games, I think. Look at Terraria and the Reaver Shark. Players who know about it can fish for it at the very beginning of the game and have the best pre-hard mode gear before even fighting a first boss. It's extremely powerful, but the game doesn't tell you about it, nor is it required at all. If you go through pre-hard mode without ever getting the Reaver Shark, it's still an enjoyable experience, so the progression skip doesn't interfere with the game and is just an addition. It rewards good players for knowing the secrets about the game. And it's clear people like this progression skip because whenever it got nerfed, a lot of players were rightfully upset. In Arcane Raise, it almost feels like a necessity. It feels required to make any sort of tangible progress in the game. Now, there's one more progression skip item that I haven't really talked about yet because it's a doozy and I'm going to be covering it for a while. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the stat boost items. These items are relatively cheap and whenever you use them, they permanently increase your stat for whatever respective item that you bought. So, hypothetically speaking, you don't even need to buy any equipment because you can spend all your money on stat boost items. Learning this around halfway through, I completely switched over to this method of increasing stats instead of worrying about the weapons at all, applying stacks upon stacks and applying them just to one character so that I can go to the highest level dungeon and beat up enemies for more XP and gold. I don't even know how this gets past a developer. How did anyone look at this and think it was a good idea? I mean, despite that, I still abused it even if I think it's really dumb because why wouldn't I? But after playing a bit and using these items, I kind of thought of a new challenge for myself. I realized it wasn't that hard to max out your stats, so I thought, is there a possible way that you could one-shot the final boss? No, seriously, it sounds dumb, but considering how unbalanced the game already is, I thought it might be possible. Now with a new goal in mind, I went to the drawing board to see what I could do. Obviously, the first goal was to max out the attack stat of my main character. Now, this could be quite literally anybody, because you could just max out the attack of any 3 of your party members, even if they're the magic user. However, the one exception to my rule of not using any skills was a skill that could increase a party member's attack stat. Honestly, I have no clue if this actually has any effect because it's already maxed out, but I thought to try it anyway. Additionally, I obviously increased the agility stat just so I'd be able to outspeed the main main boss. This is the same case for defense too, as I just didn't want to die immediately. However, there was one stat that I had increased that was a little bit unorthodox. I had maxed out the luck stat as well, under the impression that it would increase the critical strike chance. This was because critical hits multiply the regular damage by 300%. However, after looking this up, it seems that the luck stat actually doesn't affect that and more affects the probability of status effects being applied. Nevertheless, there was not really much else that I could do to be able to do any more damage to the boss, so I went into the fight expecting the worst but hoping for the best. I mean, I spent around an hour and a half reaching to this goal, so it should be possible, right? And yeah, apparently that wasn't enough. Even with my lucky critical hit that wasn't even based off the stat, I still couldn't kill it. I'd actually tried the boss a few times after this, but honestly, I just didn't care enough to finish it. I didn't want to spend another hour or so trying to concoct new methods to be able to one-shot the boss because it just doesn't matter to me that much. So instead, I just decided to close the game and begin working on this video. And that's what Arcane Raise has to offer. Now, with all that said, is there anything I think this game does good? No. There's a fucking rooster outside my house who won't shut up, and I swear to God I'm going to go outside and strangle it. It's hard to necessarily summarize my thoughts with a game like this because there's so much I dislike about it that I can't even put it into simple words. Like, for instance, I never even mentioned that this is just a default RPG Maker stock image game. All the assets in the game are just from the default RPG Maker menu. That's it. There is not a single original asset or idea in this entire game that I haven't already seen 1,000 times over. It just does it worse than everything else. I don't even know necessarily why I made this video. There's just certain topics that I want to talk about that I feel a little bit more passionate about than any other, and I don't think this video is gonna do well, but you know, that doesn't matter too much to me. I want to be a YouTuber that people watch much more for her personality rather than the stuff that she's talking about. But contradictory to that statement, this video isn't necessarily like a lot of what I do. There's a lot less humor in this than my other videos, and there's kind of a reason for that. However, I'm gonna save that for an update video that I'm gonna be working on a little bit later in the week. Regardless though, thanks for sticking around and thanks for watching this video. Arcane Raise forever!